Ask your Lolo this. Were Filipinos poor before Spain arrived? He'll probably say yes, because that's what most of us were taught. Primitive islands, simple villages, people who supposedly needed Spain to bring them civilization. Here's what that history lesson left out. Before Spain arrived, there were 5 Filipino kingdoms so wealthy that Spain's own royal treasury couldn't match what any single one of them had, not combined, individually. And what happened to that wealth afterward is one of the harder stories in Filipino history to sit with. When Spanish forces landed in the Philippines in 1565, they expected the same thing they'd found in every other colony. Simple people, limited resources, and easy conquest. What they actually found stopped them in their tracks. Gold, everywhere. Not hidden, not buried, worn openly on bodies, displayed in homes, sold in markets. The Spanish chronicler, Miguel de Lorca, wrote home, describing Filipino nobility wearing more gold than the Spanish royal court itself. Gold anklets, gold armbands stacked from wrist to elbow, gold neckpieces crafted with extraordinary detail, and ordinary merchants, not royalty, wearing gold that European nobles would have envied. This was not a struggling society. This was a civilization that had been accumulating and refining gold for over 1,000 years, and it belonged to 5 kingdoms, kingdoms wealthier than Spain itself. Start with Butuan, a place where even slaves wore gold. Ask around, and most people haven't heard much about Butuan beyond a single line in a textbook. But it deserves far more attention, because Butuan wasn't just one of the wealthiest kingdoms in Southeast Asia. It was arguably the wealthiest. Full stop. In 1001 C, Butuan's ruler, Rajahnate, sent diplomatic envoys to the Chinese imperial court. Chinese scholars, men who'd already seen the wealth of kingdoms across Asia, wrote detailed accounts of what those envoys brought with them, and they were stunned. Their records describe Butuan as having more gold than Sumatra, a place already legendary across Asia for its wealth, noting that gold was so abundant there that even enslaved people wore gold jewelry, not just kings or nobles. Think about what that actually means. In medieval Europe, gold was scarce enough that kings went to war over it. In Butuan, it was common enough that even the lowest members of society wore it as everyday decoration. Chinese records describe homes decorated with gold ornaments and everyday objects made from gold, used almost the way people today might use plastic. Archaeology backs all of this up. Excavations in Butuan have uncovered gold artifacts of remarkable craftsmanship dating back to the 4th century, alongside beads from Egypt and pottery from China, Thailand, and Vietnam. Butuan wasn't just rich, it was plugged into trade networks spanning 3 continents. Then Spain arrived, and that gold disappeared for good next to Tondo. The kingdom Manila was built directly on top of. Anyone who's walked through Manila has walked over what used to be Tondo. When Spanish forces captured Manila in 1571 and built their colonial capital there, they built it right on top of the ruins of one of Southeast Asia's more powerful kingdoms, a maritime power that had controlled trade routes across the region for over 600 years. Founded around 900 CE, Tondo's reach extended across Luzon and beyond. And we know this, in large part, because of a single remarkable artifact, the Laguna Copperplate, dated to 900 CE, the oldest known written document in Philippine history. It's a legal document dealing with debt forgiveness, written in Old Malay, using an Indian-derived script, and it references trade ties, financial arrangements, and diplomatic relationships across Southeast Asia. This wasn't a basic settlement. This was a kingdom with written law, a functioning financial system, and a bureaucracy sophisticated enough to produce formal legal documents. Nearly 1,100 years ago, Tondo's ruler carried the title Lakandula, meaning Lord of the Palace. The last great Lakandula initially cooperated with Spain, hoping to protect his people, but his nephew, Raja Suleiman, refused to submit and died fighting Spanish forces. At the Battle of Bangkusay Channel in 1571, Spain then built Intramuros, their colonial capital, directly over everything Tondo had built, a kingdom that had traded with China for 6 centuries. became the physical foundation of Spanish colonial power in Asia. Then there's Cebu, the kingdom that killed Magellan. Most Filipinos know the name Lapu-Lapu, but fewer know exactly what he was defending. He wasn't just a warrior, he was protecting one of the wealthiest trading kingdoms in the Visayas, the Rajahnate of Cebu, founded in the 1200s by Sri Lume, a prince connected to the Chola dynasty of Sumatra. By the time Magellan arrived, Cebu had grown into a major trading hub, linking the Visayas to the broader Southeast Asian economy. When Magellan showed up in 1521, Rajahnate welcomed him, seeing an opportunity for a powerful new trading partner, and even converted to Christianity, along with hundreds of his people. But Magellan's fatal mistake was getting involved in local politics, offering to help Humabon defeat his rival, Datu Lapu-Lapu, of nearby Mactan. On April 27, 1521, Magellan led a small force onto Mactan, where Lapu-Lapu was waiting. In the battle that followed, Filipino warriors killed Magellan and drove off. The rest of his men, one of history's most famous explorers, killed on a Philippine beach by a local ruler defending his kingdom's independence. What often gets left out is that Cebu didn't fall that day. It continued as an independent kingdom for another 44 years, still trading, still wealthy, still sovereign, until Spain in 1565. The kingdom that killed Magellan eventually became the first permanent Spanish settlement in the Philippines, its gold melted down, its independence erased. Then Sulu. The kingdom Spain never actually conquered. This one is worth sitting with, because Spain tried for over 300 years and failed every single time. The Sultanate of Sulu, founded in 1405, controlled the Sulu archipelago, along with parts of Borneo and Sulawesi. Its wealth came from two sources, pearls and naval power. The Sulu Sea produced some of the finest pearls anywhere, traded across Asia and the Middle East, at prices that stunned European merchants. But what Spain genuinely feared wasn't the pearls, it was Sulu's fleet of fast-trading vessels that knew every reef, every current, and every hidden channel in those waters better than any outsider ever could. Spain called them pirates. Sulu saw them as naval defenders of their own sovereignty. For 3 centuries, Spain threw everything at Sulu. Military expeditions, blockades, alliances with rival kingdoms, and none of it worked. Sulu's sailors knew their home waters the way someone knows the streets of their own hometown, every approach, every escape route, every hiding place, and Spanish galleons simply couldn't follow them into waters too shallow and too complex to navigate. It wasn't until the American colonial period, in 1915, that the Sultanate of Sulu was formally abolished, making it one of the longest surviving kingdoms in Southeast Asian history. Spain ruled the Philippines for 333 years. It never once ruled Sulu. Finally, Maguindanao, the kingdom that gave Spain its worst headache. Founded in the early 1500s, the Sultanate of Maguindanao controlled the fertile Cotabato Valley, the breadbasket of Muslim Mindanao. But its greatest asset wasn't the land. It was one man, Sultan Kudarat, who ruled from 1619 to 1671 and kept Spanish commanders across the islands losing sleep. For 52 years straight, while other kingdoms fell, Kudarat unified Muslim territories across Mindanao and Sulu into a single defensive alliance, and he didn't rely on courage alone. He fought with strategy, acquiring cannons and firearms through trade with the Dutch, who were fighting Spain elsewhere in Southeast Asia at the time. He fortified his capital, trained professional soldiers, and built an intelligence network tracking Spanish movements. When Spanish expeditions arrived, expecting to face disorganized fighters, they instead found trained armies with artillery, fortifications, and tactical planning, matching anything Spain had encountered anywhere in Asia. His speech, rejecting Spanish demands for surrender, is still referenced today as a striking piece of defiant rhetoric. A ruler refusing to bow to the most powerful colonial empire on earth. Spain eventually gained some foothold in Maguindanao territory, but never truly controlled it. It took American forces with modern 20th century weapons to finally subdue the region in the early 1900s, making Maguindanao the last Philippine kingdom to fall. So where did all that gold actually go? Butuan's gold, Tondo's wealth, Cebu's riches. Here's the part that's hard to hear. It was melted down, not studied, not preserved, melted. Spanish colonial forces systematically gathered Filipino gold artifacts, ceremonial pieces, artwork, jewelry, representing generations of craftsmanship, and fed them into furnaces. The molten gold was cast into bars, loaded onto Manila galleons and shipped to Spain, where it helped fund European palaces and fill European royal treasuries. The National Museum of the Philippines estimates that only a small fraction of pre-colonial Filipino gold artifacts survived that process. The rest gone permanently, not lost, and waiting to be rediscovered, but deliberately destroyed by a colonial system that looked at 1,000 years of Filipino craftsmanship and saw only raw material. So the next time someone claims Filipinos were poor before Spain arrived, here's the actual story. Before Spain, Filipino kingdoms were wealthy enough that even enslaved people wore gold. Before Spain, Filipino traders negotiated directly with Chinese emperors and Arab merchants. Before Spain, Filipino kingdoms held off the most powerful colonial empire on earth for centuries. And when Spain finally took the gold, they weren't just taking metal, they were trying to erase physical proof of a civilization they didn't want remembered. But the memory survived anyway, in the Laguna Copperplate sitting in the National Museum. In the Butuan gold artifacts, archaeologists pulled from the ground, in the oral histories of Sulu and Maguindanao, kingdoms that refused to forget and refused to bow, and in anyone who hears this story and decides to remember it too.